Hey all, A Knife's Tale here, bringing you another knife review. Today we're going to be looking at the Demko knives AD20.5 in Ultim with the slicer blade shape, 20 CV, and of course this knife is utilizing the shark lock, which Andrew Demko designed, along with the triad lock and the scorpion lock that Cold Steel used because he used to design knives for them. This is one of his own designs and put out by his own company. I have quite a bit to say on this, and I'll be honest with you, I have taken a few attempts to do this video. I'm trying to say what I want well, and I'm failing. So, quick specs would be, you got 3 inches of blade to the plunge, but you got about 3 1/8 to the scale. You have 7 and, it's over 7.5, under 7 5/8, so it's like 7.55 overall. And the handle overall is right near 4.5, just a bit, right? Pretty darn close to it. So 4.5 inches of handle to about 3 inches of blade. Not the best ratios, and as you can pretty much see, no, it's not the best ratios. We'll talk more about that in a moment. Or I should say, we'll talk more about that once we're done with the specifications. And let's jump into a comparison using Civivi Elementum and Civivi Conspirator. This knife falls pretty much in between the two. I'd say it's, yeah, kind of almost exactly in between the two. It should be noted that it has about the same blade length as the Elementum. Really close to it. And maybe a hair more cutting edge, because the Elementum has more choil, but just barely. It's definitely smaller than the Conspirator. It is, however, a reasonably tall knife, being pretty much taller than the Conspirator in everything except for maybe from here to the flipper tab. That's comparable. What isn't really comparable is how narrow the knife is. This is a very thin knife. In fact, so thin that it is thinner than the Elementum. So, tall, but not unreasonably long, but it is quite thin. Let's get a weight. 3.35 ounces. Not quite ounce an inch. It's got a good weight ratio, blade length to weight ratio. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good. This is going to be one of the lighter variants of these around. The lightest is probably the carbon fiber variant. Or it should definitely be the carbon fiber variant. The regular plastic FRN, Grivery, whatever their handles are probably about as heavy as this one, and of course, the G10 is slightly heavier, and the titanium is most likely considerably heavier. But it's not terrible weight ratios, probably even for the titanium one. Well, the ratios are off, but the overall weight of the knife is reasonable to carry, in my opinion. Most likely for this knife. Let's get some. Blade stock is about 125 thousandths. Handle thickness is, 394 thousandths, so it's pretty thin. Decently under half an inch. Behind the edge, and this knife has not been sharpened. Oh, come on, you can't be there much, right? Yeah, it's a little hard to get on this one. I don't know why it's not cooperating with me, but 22 to 23 thousandths behind the edge, and a big edge bevel. This, despite the name of the blade shape, is not a slicer. It is not thin behind the edge. We will talk about that. Hardware check. I'm almost positive, in fact I am positive, that this is in fact, I'll show you, a T10 pivot. Yes, it's a T10 pivot. All of the rest of this hardware, and there are 6 in total, unfortunately, are T6 for whatever reason. I really don't like that, especially when there's this much hardware. Especially when it kind of goes in the face of the spirit of the knife being something that does not shy away from being how do I want to say this? It is forward with its presentation being a tool and having hardware, and I don't know, it's not sleek. I don't know, I'm stumbling over words today. But this one gives me some issues sometimes. Okay, so basic specs are out of the way. This knife is on bearings. The deployment methods are the fuller here. For the reversed thumb flick, you can use the shark lock to flick it open. And the shark lock makes some good noises. And because of all these sort of options, it's a relatively fidgety knife, and it's super ambidextrous because the shark lock works on the back of the spine, so the pocket clip can be on either side, though what you have to notice is, of course, this pocket clip does not flip over. They do include an alternate pocket clip for left-handed carry in the box, which is nice. I mean, it'd be kind of pretty weird if they didn't, considering just how ambidextrous this locking system is. There is a steel, you can see it, a steel subframe, I guess. It's more than just sort of like an inset lock or anything. It's a subframe. Yeah. So back to the clip, real fast. The clip is awful. My God, it is awful. Not only is there a giant flat spot on the end of the clip, in my particular case, I don't know if this is the case for all of them, it points downwards towards the handle. Fine retention. It is not a titanium clip or anything like that, so I mean it's just a steel clip. It's got fine retention, but it's not deep carry. It honestly doesn't disappear in the hand like a lot of non-deep carry clips can do. It's okay in the hand. It's not uncomfortable in any way, but you feel it a bit. But its function is terrible. Does not go in the pocket well, and this is very aggressive diamond texture on the outside of this knife. You can get variants that are flat. The carbon fiber, of course, I don't think has texture in it. The one version of the titanium, I'm pretty sure you can get G10 and variants that don't have any texture on them. But everyone that has sort of this diamond texture, yeah, it's aggressive. And it's going to eat your pockets. It's not really a good clip design. It's also prioritizing a lanyard hole, which I don't like to see. So, reversible or not, it's you're not having a great time with this. The original variants of this were in the plastic handles, had the Demko logo underneath the clip, and that offered some level of protection, but most of them now I don't think do. So, if you want to pick up this thing, maybe consider not getting a textured variant. Because even if you replace the clip, which there are tons of aftermarket scales, clips, all kinds of things, people doing regrinds and reblades. There's tons of aftermarket stuff you can do to this knife, but I don't know if a replacement clip is really going to save that texture under there. You can be the judge of that, but yeah. So, ergos. Ergos are all right. It's not super comfortable. It's a super prescriptive grip. You've got this bump back here. I mean, if your hand fits, it fits. If it doesn't, it doesn't. I mean, they're fine. They're reasonably decent. You're definitely locked in. I can feel the clip a little bit. I will say that on this one, and I'd guess all of the variants, they have very hard 90-degree edges for the edges of the scales here. It is sheer drops. And while that's okay for most of the handle, when I go to grab this thing, if I grab it a little far up, that pokes into my finger and it's kind of uncomfortable. So ergos aren't fantastic there. Like if I want to go up on the blade, I tend to push in a little bit more, and I wouldn't consider that super comfortable because these are kind of sharp a little bit. And they're hard angles. This knife does have a forward half choil, which you'll see on a lot of cold steel knives as well. I think it must be Demko's thing, where they've got a choil in the handle, but not so much of a choil in the blade. I mean, they have a choil, but not a finger choil. On bigger knives, it probably works fine, but I gotta be honest with you. Choking up into this knife, I feel like I'm going to roll into the corner of that edge. I don't feel super comfortable with that. I don't, and I'm also not comfortable there. If this area is a problem because you butt into it, when you're pulling on it like a trigger, yeah, guess what's a problem? These edges are horrible, frankly. So I'm not comfortable there, and I'm not at all feeling confident. You can kind of see it pushing into my skin already. Maybe for just a one knuckle grip, I suppose that would work. So honestly, this is kind of not functional, in my opinion. I mean, user mileage will vary depending on the size of your hands, the way you choke up and hold on to things, what you're willing to put up with. But I just find this uncomfortable up here and not safe. There is a stop pin. It's right here. It's only for the open position. The closed position is actually using the bottom of the shark lock. I forgot what it was called there for. You can see the patent number right there, and you can also see where it impacts the shark lock right under there. The plunge grind on this knife is fine. It's basically right here. Gives you a little more than half that little sharpening choil. Sharpen away. It's nowhere near the edge or the stop pin, so you can definitely cut in your own choil. Though, again, geometry is a thing, and this thing does not have a lot of room to drop down and does not drop particularly thin, despite the room it has. It honestly doesn't drop that thin. It gets thick fast up the blade. So sharpening choil is fine, but you're still going to be pushing a wedge that's increasingly thick the more you sharpen up this knife. I will say the finish is pretty nice. It's got a very attractive stonewash. As far as branding goes, I like the Demko on the blade, and I don't mind the 20CV and even the Taiwan on the blade. This is made in Taiwan, not China or the US, but for the US, wampum PA specifically. So it's not going to be quite as cheap as something made in China, but we'll talk about price in a moment. The pivot, however, is branded with both wampum PA and Demko knives, and I hate that. It's just unattractive. I mean, I don't mind a logo if it's, or even a letter or something if it's abstract enough, or it fits and flows with the design. Like, I think the Civivi logo, when it's shiny like this, just sort of works. It doesn't detract. It gives a certain element to the knife. But all of this wording, whether it's Demko knives or even something like Tucson knives, where they have all of their words and sentences branded around the pivot on some of their knives, I don't like it. Don't like it at all. That is unattractive. And you also have your brand right there, so I don't get it. Maybe that's just me, but I don't like that. So, before we get into some final thoughts, I'm going to mention that the pricing on this knife is... You know what, before we even get into pricing, I'm going to mention this shark lock. In case you don't know, the way this works is it's sort of a loop of material with a spring in it. Or, yeah, it's a loop of material that way, and it's got a spring in it. And what it does is it pushes this material, this steel, up onto the back of the blade tang, which is sitting here. So it sits right here and prevents the blade from disengaging. You have to pull it back and up because there is a little hump on the back of the tang, you can see right there, that you have to get over, and can only be done when you have up, when you've pulled up on the lock. That's what I'm trying to say. And again, the same thing, pretty much. The lock slides forward and engages onto this little hump, around this little hump, to hold the knife shut, but that's rounded off so you can just sort of pull it out. This is a hard angle, and it makes for an extremely strong lock. And an extremely reliable lock. It is probably one of the strongest locks on the market. So that's a thing. And it makes the whole knife function a little bit differently than a lot of other knives, because you can disengage it with your finger and stuff like that. It does not provide the greatest of detents, but it has some retention that you have to overcome, and it's not hard to overcome. So now we'll move on to the price, and we've got the basic version of this knife, the AUS 10 and Grivery version of this knife at $120, which is horrific. I don't like that price at all. I get that this is very detailed and this requires a lot more work put into it to do this. There's a lot more parts and everything like this. But you can easily get those materials in a $20 to $30 knife. Maybe a little over 30 if you're looking for some style or something like that. Kubi or something. And yes, it's out of China, but the base price of this is not budget and not really offering much. If you're looking to mod the thing, sure, go with that. Just go with that, get a reblade and a different set of handle scales and clip, and realize that you're going to be into this knife for like $700, $800, $900 for if that's what you want to do. The mid-tier variant of this knife is, I believe, around the 260 mark. And that would be in G10 and carbon fiber. The G10 I think is 250 and the carbon fiber is 265, I want to say. They come with S35 VN, and honestly, they feel a little bit more appropriately priced, particularly the carbon fiber. Carbon fiber, this lock, S35 for $265. It's not bad. That's a reasonable price I can see paying if you really want this knife. There is a more premium variant that comes in at, oh god, that's got to be 360s probably. That's in titanium and 20 CV. I personally don't like that one. I think if you're going to go that route, just wait for one of the machine ground ones that are made in the US or now are being made in Italy, and you can not only get the 80/20 slicer or slim or full size, which is the bigger knife, but only end up paying like, I think they're $450 to $500, something like that. I may be off on that. I haven't really looked into them, but if you're going for big and full size, yeah, you won't be getting the tie, but kind of more interesting knife at that point, which is not a much bigger expenditure that's out of the realm of you're already paying premium prices. There are a couple unique variants of this, I think, floating around, like this one. This one is, of course, in 20 CV, but with Ultim, and I think it's a Blade HQ exclusive, and it was like $230-ish. It might be on sale right now, or when I saw it last, but yeah, $230, which is pretty okay. I mean, it's arguably, I think there were also a G10 variant instead of Ultim, though those are sold out, I'm pretty sure. Most of the exclusive variants of this are sold out. The G10 and Ultim with 20 CV is a decent buy at $230. Still not ultra compelling to me for what you're getting and the look of the knife and everything, but basically you have a lot of options here, but only the mid-tier really feels more reasonably priced. This version and the carbon fiber or regular G10 and S35. The base version just sort of hurts. And I wasn't interested in this knife for a long time because of that initial price tag when it dropped. But, yeah. So, final thoughts, and this is where things are going to get a little bit maybe controversial. I don't know. Probably not. But this is a very, very popular knife. I know that it's extremely popular. It's got enough aftermarket materials and stuff that clearly people are out there customizing these things and loving them. I am not one of those people. I will give it one slight adjustment in that there is a smaller variant of these that recently came out, the Shark Cub. It's like a 1/4 inch shorter in blade and handle-ish. It's got a more neutral handle, and I think they're in like Ultima G10 and 20 CV for $160, $170. Not a bad price. It's honestly even better than this one. And pretty comparable, and you're not getting much less size, but you're getting potentially better ergos without this hook on the end. So you have more room to move around on and adjust. Those are interesting. It's probably a good upgrade in general, even though you're getting less blade. But, as I said, I am not someone who is in love with this thing. I don't like the way it looks. I don't like the blade to handle ratio, which is awful. I don't like seeing the giant exposed tang that much. Some knives it doesn't bother me, but this one is just, there's too much. I don't like this area. I don't like the choke-up position. Mine is also considerably off-center, and, I mean, I don't know if I can center this thing. I wouldn't know exactly what to do. The old lodge something in between the lock and loosen the screws and tighten them back down and try to get it to center doesn't do anything on this thing. So it's considerably off-center, which is a QC issue. Another issue that I'm having is I find that the pivot, even though I Loctited it, backs out a little bit. And it seems to do that pretty consistently. Not a lot, but enough that eventually I start feeling a little bit of play in there. Now, I'm not concerned with the lock strength, but I don't like play. So the QC is questionable. Also, as you can see, aside from having the off-center, there's a considerable amount of blade that could have probably been put into that end if you just restructure this a little bit. But they didn't. So, I like the lock. I like what Andrew Demko is doing. I like that he's probably working on new stuff even now, and this is interesting, but not so compelling to me as I guess maybe it is to some others, because everything else around it I don't like. I don't like the ergos. I don't like the way the handle's done. I don't like the clip. I don't like the shape of the choil. I really don't like this geometry. This is hard use knife geometry in what is clearly trying to be a pocket-friendly EDC cutter. It makes sense on the larger version of this knife. It's a bigger knife. The customs and the machine ground versions are much larger. They are chunky, they're huge, they're big, heavy duty, hard use knives. It makes sense there if that's what you're looking for. That's kind of why I think the machine ground versions are probably the best bet to get your money's worth. But in this is a relatively light EDC knife that is normally in this category you are prioritizing cutting. And this thing cuts. But, I mean, I recently earlier, used this to cut through cardboard. And I had another knife with me. In fact, for convenience and review's sake, I used this. This does have an edge on it. It's not a new edge. It is a little bit dull. It's probably going to need a sharpening in a little while, or at least a touch-up, most likely. More touch-up. But, I mean, I've sharpened it, so it's a little thicker than it even started out being. And there's noticeable difference. This thing does not cut as well. It did not go through that cardboard that well. It required more. Is that a big deal? No, but it sort of is trying to be two things at once, where you look to slicey, cutting, really good knives for your pocket knife, and then you look to bigger, chunkier, harder use knives if the task demands. This thing seems to be trying to sit in between them with the extra hardware and the grind and everything. But it also isn't necessarily as big as I'd want for just a big, comfortable, hard use thing to push through. I mean, I'd argue that just getting a fixed blade for that would probably be better, but if you want to carry a pocket knife that folds, yeah, there are better hard use options than this small light one. So it's not really doing either thing great. I guess it's still doing the hard use thing a bit. And it cuts, but it's not great. I've also noticed that this 20CV, it's not losing its edge. Like, the edge is fine, but it lost some of its bite relatively quickly. I haven't done that extensive for the 20CV to have lost bite like this. I could probably touch... no, a strap won't do it. I'll probably have to use just like a high grit stone to just get some of that bite back, maybe. See if that touch-up will work. I don't know. So I'm questioning somewhat the heat treat on this thing. I do know that when they first came out, the ALS 10 ones were supposedly doing pretty unimpressively in regards to their heat treats, which is not great considering ALS 10 is much easier to heat treat than 20CV. So, yeah, I don't really like this knife. I don't think this should be called the slicer blade shape, certainly not. I would hope it's thinner, but maybe it's not even thinner than the other blade shapes, which is there's a clip point and shark's foot. I'd say the draw cuts are probably okay, especially with the shark's foot. Maybe that's your best bet, but you're getting even less blade length in there, so I don't know. I'm confused by this knife. And I'm very glad that I waited and did not buy one of these knives earlier. In fact, when I did buy this was on like a super ultra sale, and I got this for $135, I want to say. That was a ridiculously good buy. I saw that sale and I'm like, okay, yeah, that's basically base model price for more than you can normally expect to get at that price point. So that was easy for me to suddenly say, you know what, I want to check one out. Here's the best opportunity I've seen. No problems. But almost everything else on this knife feels like it needs to be redesigned. I know that Flytanium came out with the Arcade, which is using the Shark Lock and is a different design. I don't know if it's any better geometry-wise, but it's definitely different handle shape, definitely different ergos and clip and all that other stuff. And that alone, I would say, probably makes it almost an unequivocally better option. Hopefully it's also thinner behind the edge. But I also think it might be a slightly larger knife too, so maybe you can get away with calling it intentionally more heavy duty. I don't know. This one just... I don't think it knows what it wants to be. And so it's not really doing anything great. And I do not like it. I don't recommend this knife. It feels more like a novelty. And if you're buying a knife for your collection that's just interesting because it's using this lock, then just go for the real deal. Go for the larger ones. Yeah, you'll be paying a bit more, but you'll get a proper knife that knows what it's doing. Also, this stupid choil just feels like it was when it was scaled down. It just doesn't work. Sometimes that happens. When larger knives are scaled down, they just don't always work in all of their features. They need to be reworked. This is one of these cases. Another example would be something like the Medford Slim Midi. I like that knife. I had that knife. I did sell that knife. But there is no doubt that that knife is got a very tight lock bar access. I really like the knife, but the lock bar access is tight. It probably wasn't a problem on the larger Medford Marauder because it's a bigger, thicker, wider knife all around. You probably can get into the lock much easier. When you scale it down, things need adjusting. And in this case, a lot needs redesigning. So that's really my thoughts on this. Tell me what your thoughts are. Maybe you love yours. Maybe you think I'm wrong. Maybe I'm overlooking something. Or I'm missing something. I just don't see the value here. Maybe that's just me. Let me know. Like and subscribe if you want. Comment would be almost more appreciated here on this one, because I want to know your thoughts. That's all for me today, though. This one took a while, but there's a lot to say on this thing, so yeah, I'm done now. Bye-bye. Thanks for watching.